Well, ladies and gentlemen, when I was young, I knew a man in our community, a very elderly man in our community who was an eyewitness to history. And he had survived the Armenian genocide, and in his village, he as a boy, he told me, was the sole survivor. He was the sole survivor. His best friend had helped hide him as a boy. And he explained what he saw around him as he emerged. And that was my first introduction to the reality of what happened. But as I got a little older and looked into this issue, I became aware of what you already know, that our government at the time knew only too well, because Henry Morgenthau, our ambassador, was pleading with our government and the world to take notice at the time, to take notice of what was happening to a genocide of 1.5 billion human beings. And he said that the Ottoman government never had any intention of relocating these people. We all know the arguments that the critics make. He said at the time, because the government was quite correct with him, he said the Ottoman government never had any intention of relocating those people. Their goal was to have the Armenian population die of thirst, or die of hunger, or be murdered by the wild Mohammedan tribes. Those were his quotes and his dispatches back to our government about what he was witnessing at the time. And in the deafening silence that came afterwards was laid the groundwork, as you know, for Adolf Hitler to say to his Joint Chiefs, "Who speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" Was laid the groundwork for the genocides that occurred in Africa and the genocides that occurred in Europe. When I got to the State Senate, I did write the resolution, the first resolution that was passed on the Armenian genocide, and we did pass that as a state senator. And I contacted our governor at the time, who was a ready ally in this, George DuPage. But after we passed it, after we went on record, and when I came here to the Congress, one of the first calls I got was from former Governor George DuPage. And the subject he wanted to talk to me about was this subject, was the reason why you're here today. His desire to see an accounting. His knowledge that the Ottoman government at the time knew and admitted to our ambassador what was going on, but that a government today wants to not deny that history. And at a time when we've seen the Swiss and the Swedes and the Russians and the French and the German governments go on record that we as the United States standing for human rights have that responsibility. I worked with the first bill that we got out of committee with George Radonovich and Jim Rogan and myself in a bipartisan coalition. And I worked on the second bill that we got out of committee, again with a bipartisan coalition with Adam Schiff on his legislation. But regardless of whether the Speaker was a Republican or a Democrat, or whether the President was a Democrat or a Republican, we have yet, other than Ronald Reagan, who spoke to this issue on the anniversary of the Armenian genocide, we have not in the Congress taken this important step that we need to take. And I'm just here to close with an observation that we should keep at this as you have around the world, because as you do so, it creates a debate over this issue, and eventually this record will be straightened here in the United States. But today the world knows. Thanks to your work, today the world knows. And I was going to share with you my remarks that I made on the floor of or in committee when we were passing the bill out of committee. And it is my remarks to the critics who say that we should not dwell on history. I say it's much harder to get tomorrow right if we get yesterday wrong. The world's strength to oppose killing today is made greater by accountability for actions present, but also past. It's weakened by denial of accountability of past acts. Not recognizing the Armenian genocide does just that. And that is why we will not give up. Thank you all very much.